And people have no idea, unless they've actually gone through it, how dysfunctional the legislative process is and has become because of the two-thirds requirement. Back when it was functional, before term limits and when people had relationships, which they developed over long periods of time, in emergencies, a Republican could vote for a tax. But it's not the way things work anymore. They're literally precluded by their caucus from doing it. When the Republican votes for a tax, even in this dire emergency, their caucus has threatened and in reality will actually take them out. They'll sponsor recalls, they'll defeat them. So in reality, there is no ability to pass a tax, no matter how dire the circumstance. And this is critical for us because we're getting burned. The way the process works now, it's just impossible. It's a disaster of epic proportions. It's purely caused by the two-thirds budget.
Because as you all know, the city is definitely hurt when the state does not pass its budget on time. Here we are now looking at some dramatic cuts to our budget, to our transportation dollars, to our redevelopment dollars, to our ability to get our fair share of property taxes, when we've already passed our own budget, and we may have to go back to the table to make some changes because the state has not passed its budget
done because we have to wait for it. But one of the concerns I have on the strict 50% or over 50% is that depending on what party's in, they could just ramrod the budget in any fashion they want. Prior to Prop 16, there was a caveat of 5% that if it was 50%, if it went above 5% increase in the budget, it went to two-thirds. What I would like to see and make a motion is that to ensure that there's some issues of protection for unintended consequences, that we have a 50% vote, as long as the budget doesn't go 5% over or 5% low, which doesn't allow people to cut it drastically or increase it drastically without that larger vote. I think as long as the state is set up as a partisan group, the lack of cooperation is going to be there. And I think with the when two-thirds are gone, you'll have even less cooperation because people say, I have the votes, I don't even have to discuss it. And we find often that's not the best policy. Just as we are here today in the council nonpartisan, we get to vote on what we choose to vote on. We have no one that's punishing us one way or
another. Are angry. Our schools are failing, our infrastructure is crumbling, and we are looking at our prisons overcrowding. We are looking at a legislature that can't pass budgets or reforms. The rules that we have passed have to change in order for California to repair itself. The two states that Mr. Huizar mentioned are Rhode Island and Arkansas. Those two economic powerhouses are the only two other states that require a two-thirds majority vote for their budget. It's ironic in this state, as we saw with the vote on Prop 8, you can take someone's civil rights away with a majority vote, but it takes a two-thirds vote just to pass a budget. All it leads to is gridlock. All it leads to is disservice. And what it does, for those who are concerned about their taxes, is it means that the government is relying on raiding our local taxes. Here's what's on the table right now in the budget deal in Sacramento. Is everybody so happy that the deal's coming together? Wait till you hear this if you live in Los Angeles. It would be a permanent take of our gas tax. Every single time that you go and you fill up your car and you pay that extra amount on the gas that's supposed to go back to our streets and our roads and stuff, suddenly that is zeroed out and we don't have money to do that at all anymore. We can't stop paving our streets altogether, so what does that mean? We'll have to take money out of our public safety, out of our fire, our police, other things. It's a borrow against our property tax, which is better because at least under Prop 1A, the people of California, this is an earlier 1A, said you can't take any more from local government, but you can borrow against. We could take out a bond in the meantime, and then they have to repay that loan. But then on top of that, they're looking at taking half of all of the redevelopment dollars in the state. Half, ladies and gentlemen. That means at a time when people don't have jobs, when we need construction, when we need all of these things that are happening, that money is going to be taken away just at the moment when that would help us bring about an economic recovery. Projects like the W Hotel that's happening in Hollywood, where we have living wage jobs at the hotel, where we have great construction jobs, where we have affordable housing on top of a subway stop. That's the sort of thing in intelligent planning that would help us get to a better city and to recover from this economic downturn.
We got to restructure the budget and the budget process in Sacramento. We can't have it the way it is, totally dysfunctional IOUs on the street. Secondly, we need a constitutional convention for political reform. This 6-year term limit is insane. Maine. By the time they figure out how to get around Sacramento, they're out of there. And it's the lobbyists and the bureaucrats that run it if you're there for only 6 years. You can barely figure out your job, and then you're out of there. That should be at least 12 years, if not, free enough for people to make that decision all the time. And we also, frankly, need a third thing called, and I just want to call it the initiative process. It's totally dysfunctional. The initiative process to be more effective. If you're a special interest, you have to let those signature gatherers know you are. And if you're a regular group of citizens, you need to have easy access for the initiative. We have to reform the initiative process. And lastly, frankly, we need to deal with political reform. I'm talking about clean money.
In Los Angeles, I don't think we have a lot in common with the state of Arkansas. Not saying that as a derogatory statement towards Arkansas or Rhode Island. We are our own unique animal. The winds in this country blow from the west to the east. People look to us. The system was not always dysfunctional, was not always that bad. They, the Democrats, Republicans, at the end of the day, somehow would come together and get it done. Term limits, without a doubt, as Bill referenced, has had a negative effect. The entire system needs to be changed. This state, the majority party is the Democratic Party. So you would think that the agenda in the state government would be led by the Democrats, or if it was the Republicans, vice versa. But it's not. The minority party at budget time, and whenever there's a 2/3 vote, that's when they control the state budget.
There are a lot of problems with the state. There's no question about that. There are a lot of problems with Los Angeles. But the focus here is on the issue of getting a budget passed. And the solution would be to lower the threshold. I agree with Mr. Wesson. If it were 60%, I'd support it. If it were 55%, I'd support it. But if it were 50% plus 1, I'd also support it. Anywhere in between would be better than 66 2/3%. But don't get confused by those who try to throw you off from what I believe is a majority belief by the people who vote in California to support a 50% plus 1 majority for budget purposes, because they don't want you to do that. So they say we need to have a constitutional convention. We have to talk about a part-time legislature. We have to do all these other radical things to fix government. No. The answer is, I'm not opposed to a constitutional convention. I might support it. I don't know the dynamics. In fact, one of the questions I have is, do they have a 2/3 vote requirement on resolutions at a constitutional convention? But to me, democracy is about the majority.
Are we recommending a level as well, or just to bring it down? This is what I wanted to ask. Is this the 50 plus 1, 55, 60, or what are we recommending? Mr. Miller.
Mr. Miller, if you can give an explanation.
Mr. Smith, strike that from the record. He said 70, Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith is waiting before he departs.
Yeah. Well, the action before you is sort of, it's a broad action to support any bills that deal with the 2/3 voter requirement. There are currently 4 bills that are working their way through that deal with this in some fashion.
Right. Would it make a sense of this, Council, if we said 55? Or would it make any sense? Does anybody have a feeling?
As the maker of the motion, Mr. LaBonge, is this on? As the maker of the motion, Mr. LaBonge, I think we should keep it broad enough to support us getting away from the 2/3 requirement, because we get stuck in any one particular percentage, it's going to lessen our effectiveness in lobbying for.
I accept the maker of the motion. I thank you, and I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. LaBonge. Thank you, Mr. Miller. And that matter is now. Mr. Weezer, you're up again, or no?
No, I was going to answer that.
Thank you. Okay, I think all questions have been answered. And we are now going to vote on that matter. Open the roll. Close the roll. Your motion was accepted as friendly, Mr. Parks. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
12 ayes. That matter passes. Thank you. Great. Hopefully, that will help the state and the budget. Next item, please.